Hi, everyone. This recording is going to be over the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. This is an individual you may want to consider to do for your research because he's very influential in three areas that are subjects to our research paper, and that would be metaphysics, determinism on the free will determinist continuum, and then also on politics. So let's review the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes. All right, so Thomas Hobbes is an English philosopher. We can see the time in which he was active. He's a great example of the issue that has an impact for all of us, that the times in which we live, does that have some impact on our outlook? And of course, we know that it does. And so perhaps when we look over the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes, his contributions, we may think he was a very pessimistic individual, or maybe we conclude he was a very realistic individual, but he lived in a violent time. So here we can see Thomas Hobbes, and again, primarily in the 1600s in England was when he was an active individual, an influential individual. This was a time of English Civil War. This was a time of regicide where an English king was executed. And so to look that type of these events over, we've got to think that it would have an impact on how Hobbes would view human nature, how he would just view the interactions of human beings. He was a materialist. So again, think about what that means when we consider um, the issues of ontology, the state of being. So the universe is corporal. All that is real is material, and what is not material is not real. So that's from his best known book, Leviathan. Materialist and monist. There's one reality. It's the physical. So materialism and monism with Hobbes did not believe in a dualism between the mind and the body. He did not believe there were actual thoughts, but instead just phantasms that had no effect on the body. So these thoughts, the brain is just firing off activity, just like a muscle spasm, or similar at least to a muscle spasm. That then reflects to his view of determinism and free will. So he would then conclude, as we can see here, all actions are caused, again from Leviathan, his book, and the causes of these causes themselves have causes. So where's free will? Does not exist. One reality, not a reality in which people can change through free will. As a result of that, then, human beings are constantly in a state of maintaining self-interest. We may not even realize that, but self-preservation is what matters the most. And again, this is a question of, do we view him as a pessimist or a realist? Hobbes believed that there was no such thing as individuals doing anything that did not better their own self-interest. And this is something we can consider. Is there something in which people do that is not related to their self-interest? So what we desire is good for us, and what we wish to avoid is evil. That's how we make a choice between good and evil. What benefits us? Again, is he a pessimist or is he a realist? Of the voluntary acts of every man, the object is some good to himself. So this is our challenge. Can you think of any act done by a human being that was not in the self-interest of that human? We can pause and think that one over. So we can say then that he's egoistic, act for one's own good. That's what we all do. And if we approach life knowing that we're no different than anyone else and that's how everyone will act, do we then make decisions accordingly, having that type of outlook about our fellow humans? Maybe some of you watched the series Breaking Bad. And it was interesting to notice the evolution of this character, at least in his own self-realization. So Walter White, the main character, high school chemistry teacher that becomes a major meth producer in the Southwest. And so if you haven't watched it, it's a very interesting series. So he starts off claiming that he was making this meth simply because he needed to provide for his family. He had a very major health concern and wanted to make sure that life would be better for his family if he was not here. So he wanted to suggest that it was altruistic why he made meth. But near the end of his life, in the end of the series, he does have a point of mentioning this to his estranged wife. I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it. And I was alive. He did this for himself. Well, Thomas Hobbes would just say, he's not doing anything strange. He's being human in that case. A big challenge for us. Do we actually do things not in our self-interest? So even someone like Father Damien, who is revered in many ways as an individual, lived in Hawaii, made some important contributions there in terms of charity and taking care of his fellow man. On the island of Molokai in Hawaii, he ran a leper colony to the point where he was caring for the lepers and he himself got leprosy. It's a fantastic story about dedication to other human beings. But even in that case, and not to say that what he did was not important and not a major contribution to helping others and something that most people would not do, but was it even there? Was he doing it in some way for his self-interest? Even Father Damien running a leper colony in which he himself got leprosy. Is there some way of analyzing that activity that he was doing it for his own self-interest? So we can see here with Hobbes that he's looking at the reality, one reality. It's the physical. There is no free will. And then that means people do things for their own self-interest, self-preservation, some benefit. We can see how all this would mix in to develop an interesting viewpoint of his politics and what his view of politics might be. So we haven't really talked about politics much in this class, and this becomes a key part of the Palmer text in the latter chapters of that book. So the word politics comes from the word polis, which means community. According to Aristotle, one of the major early Greek philosophers, We humans are political animals. Decisions have to be made in the polis. We are all part of a community. And really, stop and think about that. You are part of a community. You can't remove yourself from that. And the community doesn't really allow you to, right? You have to obey laws, you have to pay taxes. So there we can see that this is a key part of philosophy. It's a key part of human interaction, what takes place in politics. Some of the ways of looking at politics are a couple of very traditional definitions from American political scientists. Harold Laswell, who gets what, when, and how when we think of politics. And I think when we look at both these definitions, we can see that we're part of this system. We're part of politics, whether we want to be or not. And then also the authoritative allocation of values. So you think of those two definitions, how politics might apply, and why it can be a key part of philosophy. Again, maybe some area that you would be interested in your research paper. So when we look at those two definitions, according to Hobbes, the human beings should not expect freedom. That's not really a key part of what the political system should produce. To Hobbes, the government should be very strict in its control over individuals. While individuals may not like the situation, it is far better than living in the state of nature. And this is another area that we haven't really covered. Talked a little bit about it with John Locke. But in this case, as we can see, to Hobbes, the state of nature is a system that's terrible and there are no rights. So having a strict government is still a better situation than the state of nature. This is another very well-known statement by Hobbes: life without government. Life without government is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So complaints about a strict government are just nonsensical, according to Hobbes, a waste of time. Because however strict the government may be, it's still better than life without government. That becomes an interesting contribution. See how you would answer that. Life without government. How would you complete that sentence? Might spend some time thinking that one over. So this is where Hobbes provides a very important contribution. Again, we may find him to be just way too cynical, too pessimistic about human beings. But this is an interesting exercise. Maybe we never thought about it. Government does, in fact, by its very nature, restrict many of our activities. We are limited in some ways because of laws. However, what does it mean if there wasn't government? Do we think of the alternative? And so there's a good contribution by Hobbes, something for us to consider. So to Hobbes, we can't trust human beings, except that we know that human beings are wanting to do what's ever in their best self-interest. So as a result of that, you have to always take that in consideration. So the government has to be strict with individuals because we cannot trust one another. The government may abuse its power and most likely will abuse its power, but it's still better than anarchy. Anarchy, no government. What is the alternative? Always a way in which we can use Hobbes' philosophy. According to Hobbes, we have in the book Leviathan, again, that it's the state. This is what humans need. It's an artificial man. In a way, if you ever see this famous painting describing Leviathan, The king is really just made up of people. It's the embodiment of the state. And it is an artificial man, but it is comprised of all humans. We are all part of a state. And our individual needs are just not that important for what's more important, the survival of the state. Because again, the lack of survival of the state does mean lack, according to Hobbes, the lack of survival for most human beings. So the government makes a decision on what is justice. And if that's the case, then there can't be injustice from the state. The state can't produce injustice. This would certainly be a major separation than from other philosophers on political philosophy, especially someone like John Locke. There certainly can be injustice by the state. But to Hobbes, everything is created from the state. Therefore, the state can't create injustice. Might do some bad things, but it can't be unjust. So we end up limiting our own liberty according to Hobbes for the sake of other benefits, the benefit of living in a civil society. And so we should be willing to accept that, because the worst situation we could be in is to not have a government. That doesn't mean that he has faith in the government to always do good things. We can see that. But what he does see is that this is how people survive, by having a strong state. A lot to be said there about Thomas Hobbes, a challenging individual. And again, one of the things that you can consider for Hobbes, is he a pessimist or a realist? Maybe someone you'd like to do your research on. All right, we'll be moving on to some other areas and other recordings in the next time that we're together.